you ready for the main event tonight? All right, please welcome the very funny, the very kind, the very tall Glen Tickle.
Thank you, friend. Thank you, everybody. One more time for my friend Tristan Miller. Thank you for coming, everyone, to this show. Good Grief, a comedy about loss and being bad at it. This is a show I wrote when my younger brother died in a car accident. And it is a hard thing for me to talk about. It's harder to make jokes about, but I'm a goddamn professional, so that's what we're going to do. And I want to be clear, I don't like the title of the show. There's no one to blame but me. I named it. But I don't like it. To put it in comedy writing terms, I think it's a little first thought. The original title was How to Talk to the Grieving, semicolon, or How to Talk to Me specifically now that my brother is dead. And I like that title better. Is that how you use a semicolon? I don't know. That's how they did it on Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons. It's good enough for Bullwinkle. It's good enough for me. I liked it, but the first time I said that out loud, I was like, well, that's going to get exhausting. So I wanted to change it. And Good Grief wasn't even the second idea I had. I made a list of a few, and my brother's name was Mark, and one of the possibilities I wrote down was missing the mark. And then I threw that notebook in a volcano out of shame for how bad of a title that would have been. And I live in New Jersey. It's hard to find volcanoes. You really got to know where to look, but I was dedicated to ridding the world of that piece of paper. Also, this is, I know it's about my little brother dying. This is a comedy show. It is fun for you guys. I'm not going to lie, it's kind of rough for me, but you will have a nice time. I hope. I've done it a few times. Audiences seem to enjoy it. But this is also not really the start of the show yet. My brother died 3 years ago, and I've been touring this show and the material in it kind of since then. And I found that if you try to work this material into a regular stand-up set, and like most of my jokes before this happened are about my adorable children and like being, I used to be a preschool science teacher and just like nerdy science things. So it's weird to go from that to like, hey, death will come for us all. People found it off-putting for some reason. But I found when I toured it as a separate thing, people kind of got on board. So I settled on the title, Good Grief, a comedy about loss and being bad at it, which is the title of the show that you guys got tickets to. So no one's allowed to complain at the end, be like, I didn't know there'd be so many jokes about his dead brother. I think the name's a little too on the nose, but I just want to be clear what we're all in for. So again, this is not the start of the show. I came out to explain this so we all know what's going on. And also, when Tristan introduced me, you guys all clapped, right? That's what you do at comedy shows. And the reason is because it sets the tone, right? Gets the audience excited, gets the performer ready to perform. You will have a better show if at the beginning of comedy shows you guys clap real loud. It's just science. But I'm trying to set a different tone for the start of the show just because of what it's about. So Tristan, if you don't mind, I would actually like to have you come back up and reintroduce me in kind of like a somber way. An audience, if you don't mind, I would like to walk on to silence. I've done the show a bunch of times. I know it's going to feel uncomfortable for you guys, but it'll really set the tone of the show. Just think of it as a moment of silence for my younger brother, and now you feel bad and you have to do it. So everybody, Tristan Miller again.
Everybody, Glen Tickle.
I mean, you guys could have clapped a little. It's a comedy show. Jesus. Setting the tone out of the gate. The morning of June 12th, 2016, I got a phone call from my mother. She said there's been an accident and Mark is dead and that's all we know. And I took it hard, like you would expect. And the first thought that I had after finding that out was my younger brother is dead. But I come from a big family, so I do have spares. And I want to be clear, that was a thought that I had in my head. I didn't say it out loud on the phone to my mother. I kept it up here. She didn't call and go, hey, Mark died. Well, you got to hear this great joke I thought of, Mom. I think it's really going to help the situation. I kept it inside until I wrote it down. I wrote that joke down. That's a good joke. I've been doing that joke for 3 years. That's a solid setup, punchline construction. Because the thing is, like, this is how I deal with things, right? Humor is a defense mechanism that I've weaponized into a career. My brain doesn't do a lot of things very well. Like, I've been doing comedy now for over 10 years, and it was around 7 when my brother died. My brain doesn't do a lot of things very well. It is essentially just the machine that turns life experience into fun anecdotes at this point. And that doesn't stop when you're sad, apparently. So this is the assembled Tickle children. There's my sister Kristen, she's right in the middle. My older brother Brian, my baby brother Keith, the handsomest child you ever done seen. And this is my little brother Mark. And I use this picture specifically because my brother Mark was cooler than me, right? He's 4 years younger than me, but from the jump, like, was cooler than me. Like, there's a picture of me holding him as an infant, and I look like the dorkiest little 4-year-old you've ever seen, and he's just laid back doing finger guns. I'm like, I didn't even know babies could do finger guns. Why do you look so chill? But when somebody dies, right, you go through old pictures to find memories of them and stuff, and I went through a lot of pictures, and in every picture of my brother and I, he looks cooler than me. And I knew it as a fact. I just didn't realize how well documented that fact had been for 29 years. Except for this one, right? Like, again, really pulling that. So look at those dimples. I'm adorable. Pretty sure he's pooping. I have a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old. I know when I'm pooping at the dinner table face when I see it. And you might think, Glenn, why? Why would you show this picture of your younger brother pooping at a table? It's because I'm sad and I need a win. Look, it makes me feel better. It's a nice picture of all of us together, except for also, I don't know what toy this is that Keith has or why Brian and Kristen hate it so much. But they are not happy that little white dog or cat is in the picture. The title of the show is Good Grief, a comedy about loss and being bad at it. When I say being bad at it, I don't mean me. I mean you guys. Not this group specifically, just kind of everybody. We're not good at dealing with grief when somebody dies, and we should be, right? Like right now, everyone is kind of figuring out social media's place in society, which makes sense because it's not been around that long. Death's been here from the jump. We should have figured this one out. It's not like we haven't had time to prepare. We should know what to do, but we don't. And the thing is, I've been dealing with this since it happened. I've been touring this show. I've done it for a lot of different audiences. And some of the people tell me that it has helped them deal with something in their own life. And I'm very glad that that has happened. I would be lying to you if I said that was in any way my intent. It was not. This was purely for me. This is a selfish endeavor, 100%. If you guys get something out of it, great. But I don't have like an answer at the end. Like, spoiler, this doesn't culminate in me laying out how to deal with somebody dying. I don't know what to tell you. Some, like, people I know have lost people since my brother died, and I always feel, because I do this, I'm like, well, I should say something, but I don't know. I'm like, hey, it sure is bad, huh? And they're like, yup. So I don't know what to tell you, but I can tell you what not to say. I have a list of things that are not helpful, but a lot of people said them to me because they think they are. Here's what not to say to somebody if someone they love died. First one, it's all part of God's plan. This one I don't like for a few reasons. One, if you find comfort in religion, I'm very happy for you. I don't. But also, serial killers have plans. That doesn't make it okay, right? Like, inarguably, Ted Bundy had a plan. You can't be like, hey, sorry that guy ate your friend. I mean, he pretty clearly, he's got a plan. We should really, let's see how this plays out for Ted's sake. He's put a lot of work into the plan. There's the agnostic version of that, which is everything happens for a reason, which I also don't like. Because I'm a comedian, I've also worked as a science writer, and like I've studied space and the universe, and it is chaotic, and we're all just molecules bumping into each other by accident, which I don't mean to say to bum anybody out. I think that makes it more impressive that we're here and more amazing, and we should all appreciate it more than I think we do. But it's your religious aunt is the one who says it's all part of God's plan, but it's your friend from high school who's in like a multi-level marketing scheme to sell crystals now. They're the one who's like, everything happens for a reason. It doesn't. The world's chaotic. I also don't like it when people would say, oh, I'm sorry you lost your brother. I don't like it. I will probably say it a few times in the show just because it's kind of become a way that we say someone died without having to say it. But I don't like it because, like, we didn't lose him. I mean, we know where he is. Like, I got down to my parents' house that morning and people were like, oh, I'm so sorry you lost your brother. I'm like, this isn't a search party, right? Like, I can take you to where you don't want to go, but I can take you. I can show you where he is. That's not the problem. The other one, and you can say this next one, but you damn well better mean it. One thing that a lot of people said was, if there's anything I can do. Anything I can do. If there's any, I don't know, I'm saying it so sexually. If there's anything I can do, just let me know. Again, you can say it, but mean it. A friend of mine flew in from Chicago and took like 2 weeks off of work just to be around to help. Like, that's the level that you need to rise to if you say that. But my sister, when we were down at my parents' house, she's off to the side talking to somebody being sad. I'm over here being sad. And I overhear somebody say it to her. They're like, oh, Kristen, if there's anything I can do, just let me know. And she goes, well, don't feel like you have to, but I could really go for a nice coffee from Dunkin' Donuts with 3 creams and 2 of the caramel swirls. And they're like, oh, God, of course. Like, there's one of the I will, of course, go buy the sad woman a $2 iced coffee. Be a monster not to. And she's like, oh, thank you so much. And then they would leave and get her a nice coffee, and they would bring it back, and she would have one already because she said that to everyone. And they all did it. So she'd be like sipping on one. They'd be like, here you. She's like, oh God, thank you so much. And she put it on the counter behind her, which had like a dozen half-drunk Dunkin' Donuts iced coffees. Because apparently my family deals with caffeine. Because after my brother died, I got really into Starbucks reward points. As I mentioned, the universe is chaotic. You can't control a lot of stuff. You can control Starbucks reward points. Years ago, I worked with a guy who was obsessed with this system. He would go to Starbucks just to get, like, there would be times where you could get more points if you ordered coffee at like 2 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock. Or I'm like, that doesn't, just buy coffee when you want to buy coffee. And then sometimes you get a free one, it's nice. And he's like, you don't understand. And he's right, I didn't. And then my brother died, I'm like, I get it now. One thing, when people would say, if there's anything I can do, the morning that my brother died, I had intended to mow my lawn, which I hate doing, in the best of circumstances. So when people started telling me, like, oh, Glenn, if there's anything I can do, just let me know. I said, well, you know, when I found out that Mark died, I was supposed to cut my grass that morning, and I haven't, and it's been a lot. So my house is just up the street, mower's in the shed. If you could take care of that, I'd really appreciate it. And no one did because they thought I was kidding. And I super was not kidding. I very badly wanted someone other than me to cut my grass. They did not. And I'm only including this so that the dozen or so people I asked will probably see this. I just want them to feel a little bit bad. Right, but not everybody comes to you when this happens. So I would get phone calls from people. They would call and they would say like, oh, I'm so sorry. And one phrase kept popping up in these phone calls. They would call and they would say, oh God, Glenn, I'm so sorry about your brother. There's no words. The phrase, there's no words, kept popping up on these phone calls. And somebody would call and be like, oh, I'm so sorry about your brother. There's no words. Right, but you called me on the telephone. This is an audio medium. You should have thought of some words, right? Like, I'm having kind of a rough time here. I can't really talk you through this right now. You need to plan your life better. And some people sent text messages instead of calling because they're cowards. And if you ever do that, if you ever send like a condolence text, work your name in there somehow. Right? You don't have to sign it like an old-timey letter. Just be like, hey, just want you to know your old buddy Glenn's thinking about you. because I don't save a lot of people's phone numbers in my phone. It's just not a habit I ever got into. So a lot of the times I will get a text message and I have to scroll up and try to use context clues from earlier conversations to figure out who I'm talking to. Because if somebody sends you a message that says, hey, I'm sorry your brother died, it's not the time to reply with, well, new phone, who it is? Right? That's not helpful. A couple days after my brother died, I was down at my parents' house, sitting on the edge of their pool. It was above ground, so I'm not bragging. I was sitting on the edge of the pool, my feet were in the water, and I noticed a ladybug had fallen into the water. And I was like, you know what? Sad enough week already. No one else dies today. And I scooped this little bug up, and I put it on the deck next to me so it can like dry its wings and go eat aphids or whatever it had planned for the day. And I took a nice picture of it, and I put that picture up on Instagram. And within seconds, I would say, a friend of mine commented, you know what? That's probably your brother. To which I replied, you know what? No, stupid. That's a ladybug. My brother was an adult human man. Ladybugs are very small. Mark was about 6'2", had no spots. That's how you can tell them apart. It's pretty easy. Plus, like, I don't believe in reincarnation, but even if I did, not how it works, right? Like, you don't come back 4 days later as the adult version or whatever animal you have to be now, right? There's still a life cycle. You have to go from egg to larva to nymph to adult ladybug. It takes 2 to 3 weeks. I looked it up on Wikipedia, and that's how I knew that they ate aphids from the beginning of this joke. Also, hell of a demotion, I think, right? Like, if reincarnation is real and the karmic ladder is like to go from human to bug, that's not nice. That's not a nice, helpful comment. Like my brother wasn't perfect. He made some mistakes. If you told me he's a bonobo now, I'd be like, you know what? I buy it, but also I think he would have a nice time. I think he would enjoy the bonobo lifestyle. I think he would be very happy as a wild ape. It's our closest genetic relative. So a small bump down, not human bug. That's where bugs go, on the bottom. And finally, that ladybug was drowning. If I wasn't there, what, that's twice in 1 week my brother has to die? It's not a helpful comment, Leanne Marie, who is here. She came all the way from Pennsylvania to watch, and she knew I was going to do this because she's seen this show a couple of times. And every time I told her, I was like, I'm not going to call you out by name this time. And she's seen me do it enough times where you knew it was going to happen. You are my friend. And I know you mean well. Like I know I'm making fun of everybody trying to help me. I know everybody means well. I just think, I don't know, I'm going to give you that giant picture of the ladybug, by the way. Because, one, when I ordered these prints, these are a lot bigger than I thought they were going to be. I don't have a lot of room in my house for a 4-foot poster of a buck. But you can have it because you're my friend. And I feel bad for constantly doing this bit. Not bad enough to not do it, let's be clear. That's how I feel about this show, by the way. I feel bad that my reaction to my brother's death was jokes, and I feel bad that I then took those jokes on the road for 3 years, and now I'm filming them and will sell this to people. I feel bad. Again, not bad enough that I'm not going to do it. Here we are, but I felt bad. I went back to therapy after my brother died. Not right after he died. It was after I started doing comedy again and felt bad about it. Like, that's just to paint kind of a picture of what affects me as a person. And I told the therapist, I was like, I feel like I shouldn't be doing this, right? Like, I should not write a bunch of jokes about how my brother died and then go do them for people. And she's like, well, no, like, that's your job. You're a comedian, right? If you were a carpenter, for example, and your brother died and you went in your workshop to make, like, a bunch of chairs, for example, no one would think that's weird. I'm like, right, but if I carved my brother died into all the chairs, I don't know that they'd be particularly good sellers. You know, like, I think I'd have a lot left in inventory at the end of the season. Would be the problem with that example, Doc. Also, I kept going back to this therapist, and after a few sessions, she's like, Glenn, depression, obviously, look at you, but also, you show symptoms of having attention deficit disorder. And I was like, well, funny you should mention that, because a few years ago, I was going to a show with a friend of mine who's another comedian, and we were driving, and he just got diagnosed with having adult ADD. And he's like, Glenn, we're pretty similar. We have a lot in common, including like symptoms. So you should probably think about talking to somebody. I was like, you know what? You're right. And then I never did, because I have ADD and I forgot. So when this new therapist pointed out, I was like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I agree. And she's like, I think you would be helped by Adderall or some other stimulant. I was like, you know what? I got to do something. So yeah, how does this work? Do you have samples? Do you cut me a prescription? She's like, well, I'm a therapist. I can't prescribe any drugs. And I was like, so what do you want me to do? And she's like, well, just make an appointment with your regular doctor. And when you go, just describe some of the symptoms that we talked about. But before you go, Google the phrase drug-seeking behavior. And then don't do any of that. and I'm like, well, okay, but I mean, the pretty obvious flaw in your plan here is you're literally sending me there to seek drugs, right? Like, you know that. You know that's what you're doing. And she's like, right, but if he thinks you're there to just get drugs, he won't give you any. I was like, well, one, don't assume my doctor's a man, and two, I'm an adult, right? Like, can you write a note? And she's like, it's not how it works. Like, fine. So I make an appointment. I go to my doctor. My therapist is right, he's a man, but that's not the point. And I went in, I was like, I'm not gonna put on a little play for the doctor. So I told him, like, look, my therapist thinks I have ADD. She wants me to try a stimulant. He's like, nope. And I was like, should have seen this. I was pretty clearly instructed that this is how this is gonna go. So I go back to my therapist, and she's like, how'd your quest for Adderall go? I was like, I don't know why he wouldn't give it to me. I really thought I did a great job lying about not wanting drugs, but he wouldn't give me any of those drugs that I told him I didn't want. And she's like, well, you could try making an appointment with a psychiatrist, right? If they have more experience, they might feel more comfortable prescribing a stimulant of some kind. And I was like, okay, sure. And I used to see a psychiatrist. I wasn't currently when my brother died. And when I went to the psychiatrist originally, it was because I was depressed, and one of the symptoms that really made me think, like, well, I need to see somebody, was I would just cry for no real reason, like at movies, and not sad ones, specifically Spider-Man 2. I saw Spider-Man 2 in theaters, and when Mary Jane turns to him towards the end and says, go get him, Tiger, I cried uncontrollably for the rest of the movie. And in the credits, over that Chris Carrabba song, I was like, this probably isn't what I'm supposed to be doing right now. So I was like, I need to call somebody. So I went to this psychiatrist, and he put me on antidepressants. And then when I went back to him at my therapist's request, she told me, she's like, well, when you go, only talk about the ADD symptoms. Don't mention that your brother died. I'm like, why? And she's like, because then they're only going to want to treat the depression and not the ADD. And I was like, cool. So I go, I make the appointment, I meet with the psychiatrist. He's like, haven't seen you in a while. I was like, yeah, great catching up. He's like, how you been? I'm like, well, obviously not great, or we wouldn't be here. But he's like, so what are you, he looked at the chart, and he's like, have you been crying? I'm like, well, a little bit. And he's like, why? I'm like, well, my brother died. Damn it! And then sure enough, he only wanted to give me antidepressants and not Adderall. But that same week, I ran into my friend at a show who got diagnosed years ago. And he's like, hey, how you been? I'm like, not super good, pretty sad. And I told him everything. I'm like, my therapist thinks I have ADD, and she wants me to try Adderall. And he's like, well, you should be careful, because I was on Adderall, and I got addicted to it, and I just got out of rehab. I wouldn't recommend it. I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, it's super addictive. I'm like, I had no idea. So then when I went back to my therapist, she's like, how's the quest going? I was like, still no luck. I don't know why. I'm doing everything you said. exactly as you said it. And I'm not winging it in any way, but no, doctor, it's hard out there. And I told her that I ran into my friend, and I'm like, he just got out of rehab. I didn't realize how addictive Adderall was. And she's like, oh, he just got out of rehab? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, maybe he has some extra. I'm like, I don't think that's how it works. Like, I've never been to rehab, but I don't think you show up and they're like, well, let me take most of your drugs, but like keep a few in case like a friend down the road needs a bump. And I was like, yeah, now I'm worried about taking it. I didn't realize it was so addictive. And she's like, yeah, I mean, it's basically meth. I was like, oh, meth. I live in rural New Jersey. I can get meth. If you said get meth, I've been done weeks ago. What are you talking about? I took 2 weeks off of stand-up comedy when my brother died, and I felt like it wasn't enough. Because, like, family members took a few days off of work and went back, and I was like, well, I can't go back to my job where I talk for an hour, and then that's basically all I do. Well, it's too hard. And the first time I went back on stage, it was at an open mic at an art gallery that I perform at a lot. It was usually like a small group of people there, and I'd done it enough that we were all friends, and they're very supportive, so I knew it was like a safe environment to run through these jokes. So typically, if you don't know, at an open mic, everybody gets 5 minutes to run through some jokes, and then you're done. I went up with a notebook of all my sad boy jokes and explained to them as I was starting, I was like, I'm going to do all of these jokes, and if you try to take the microphone away from me, you're going to have to deal with a man in his mid-30s crying uncontrollably in an art gallery. And they were very understanding. And they let me do it. Some of them are actually here tonight, so thank you, friends. But the first page show that I did after my brother died, it was at the Kutztown Fair, the mecca of comedy. And I didn't cancel that one because I was producing it with a comedian friend of mine, Jason Brown, and there were a bunch of other comics on the show that I knew were good, and I had known them long enough where I'm like, if I bail last minute on this, they'll understand, and they'll all just do a few more minutes, and the show will still be fine. But I was driving to the show with Jason, and about 5 minutes before we get there, my sister texted me to say, hey, I'm coming to the show tonight. And I said, great. What I should have said was, okay, but I am planning on doing 20 minutes of jokes about our recently deceased brother, so maybe just go get a funnel cake and we'll meet up after. I didn't say that, so I get introduced, and I walk out on stage, and I do that great spares joke from before that you all loved so much, and my sister started crying immediately, because of course, she was right up front, and to be clear, it was easy to see, because this show was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon outside of a barn. There were only 8 other people assembled, and now all of them are staring at my sister crying. So I immediately feel bad and change the subject, and I just do jokes about my kids, right? And then I get off stage, and I immediately text my sister. I was like, I'm so sorry. It's just, you texted me right before the show. I didn't think I should have told you that's what I was going to do. And she's like, no, it's fine. It's just, I'm not mad about the joke. It was a little raw because I had to pick out an urn this morning. And my brother was cremated, not in the car accident, later on purpose. Burned him up real good. And the thing is, when you do that, right, when you get cremated, they send your family a catalog of urns and memorial statues and stuff. It's like the Sears catalog around Christmas time where as a kid you would circle all the toys you wanted. It's that, but way sadder. And I had looked through the catalog, and it was all, besides urns, there's all kinds of stuff they will put ashes in now. It's a hell of a time to be alive or dead. And there's urns, and you can get pendants, and they have jewelry and accessories. And to me, it all looked kind of maudlin to me. A bunch of people got urns and jewelry and stuff. I didn't want anything, because to me, breaking up all those Horcruxes just complicates it. Because if they ever cure car crashes and then also cremation, it's just gonna be so much harder to put it all back together. And look, nerds, I know that's not what Horcruxes are or how they work. It works well enough for that joke to fly, and the only like one-to-one comparison would be the time Superman and Hal Jordan, when he was Spectre for a little while, had to like get every molecule of Oliver Queen to bring back the Green Arrow, and none of you know what I'm talking about, so Horcruxes. Is Kevin Smith's run on Green Arrow? No, all right. It's the nerdiest sentence I've ever written, and I literally used to run a website called Geekosystem. Horcruxes. But I didn't get anything. And the one thing I thought about getting was they had cufflinks that they would put ashes in. And I dress up probably more than your average 36-year-old guy. I would get some use out of some cufflinks. But I didn't think I could ever wear them and not just be staring at my wrists the whole time thinking, dead brother, dead brother, dead brother. And the only time that comes in handy is if I'm ever at like an award show and I'm walking down a red carpet and somebody stops and asks, who are you wearing? Funny you should ask. My family actually suffered a bit of a tragedy, and all I got were these lousy cufflinks. My brother died at a fairly inconvenient time for me specifically. And I know it sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's also objectively true. So like I said, my brother died in June of 2016. In May of 2016, I recorded my first comedy album. So I went from all-time career high to crushing personal low in a fortnight, and it didn't feel great. But the thing is, like, when you record an album or film a special, like, you're not done at the end of the show, right? You have to go out and do press and promote it and get people excited. So, like, all things that you don't want to do when you're real depressed that your brother died. But I had also booked a tour of colleges, and it paid well. So I couldn't turn it down. And everyone was like, well, how do you keep doing comedy? And I'm like, one, I'm contractually obligated. But two, to put it in a way people understand, so you know the Avengers, right? The first one. So towards the end of the movie, all the monsters are like attacking New York, and there's a big flying monster, and they need the Incredible Hulk. He's the only one strong enough who can fight this big flying monster. But Bruce Banner, the guy who turns into the Hulk, rolls in on a motorcycle, and they're all like, hey buddy, it's not that we're not happy to see you. We do kind of need that giant monster you turn into sometimes, more than we need you right now. And Captain America says to him, he says, Dr. Banner, this would be a good time for you to get angry. And Banner starts walking towards the big monster, and over his shoulder he goes, that's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry. And turns into the Incredible Hulk instantly and fights the big monster, and everybody's saved. It's one of the best moments in the movie. So when people are like, Glenn, how can you do comedy at a time like this when you're so depressed? That's my secret, guys. I'm always depressed. This is not a sensation altogether new to me. I was a depressed little kid. I was a depressed teenager. I'm a depressed adult. I'm depressed and my brother died. I'm not depressed because my brother died. Do we understand the subtle difference? Quite frankly, this is what I've been training for, right? Like, if you don't deal with depression, it just sort of always feels a little bit like your brother died, but for no reason. So when it happens, you're like, yeah, I'm ready. And you're gonna write all these jokes. So I had to go back out on the road. And typically, if you have to drive far, I'll bring like an opening act to have somebody in the car with me. It's usually another comedian. Because I know I'm self-aware enough to know that a few weeks after my brother died, I should probably not be alone on the road for a week and a half in like hotel rooms in West Virginia. Like I should have a buddy at that point. And I would normally bring a comedian, but since I lost my one brother, I was like, well, let me put the offer out to the spares. And so I told my siblings, I was like, I have this trip coming up. Any of you guys want to come? You're more than welcome. And my brother was a teacher, so he couldn't take that much time off. My sister had 2 young kids, so she couldn't go. But my remaining younger brother, Keith, he's like, well, I'm young and fairly unattached. Let's go. And he comes with me, and a couple hours into the trip, he's trying to draft his fantasy football team on his phone, but we're in like the middle of central rural Pennsylvania, so there's no cell service, and he's getting real frustrated. And I was like, I should have packed you activities. I'm sorry. Like, over the summer, we brought my daughters down to the beach, and we brought like a coloring book and like put a video on the iPad for them, like have something to do. Because to me, driving around to weird places is like a real joy in my life that I get to do. But apparently not everybody likes back roads of West Virginia for a day and a half as much as me. But we get down to the first show that we have to do, and it's in West Virginia, and it is in a giant room, just like this one. And it's a giant auditorium, and the thing is, there were half as many people there as there are in here. And also there were giant windows that they could not close, and this was summertime, so it's still very bright inside the building. And also the air conditioning didn't work, so it was 100 degrees in the building. And I keep hinting at the thought that, like, maybe we don't do the show. And they're like, oh, no, we're doing it. I was like, fine, but, like, we'll start, but can somebody go introduce me? And they're like, no. I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, no, we don't, we're all 19. We don't want to stand up in front of our peers and draw attention to ourselves. So I basically go up and interrupt a dozen college students just making small talk. I was like, hey, shut up, I'm going to do jokes now. And the show didn't go great. Not gonna lie, it wasn't my best effort. And then the next night, we are in a different city, at a different college. And again, no student will introduce me. They're like, we're shy, we don't want to do it. So I go out and I just start doing jokes. Show goes a little better, but like it still starts weird. Third show, pretty well attended, right? It's in a small theater, a bunch of people are there. And I asked, I was like, can somebody introduce me? And they're like, no. I'm like, you don't have to do jokes. Just go say my name into a microphone, please. And they're like, we super don't want to, dude. So I turned to my younger brother, Keith. I was like, Keith, I need you to introduce me. He's like, no. But I told him this, I'm like, you don't need to like do a bit. Just please go say you're supposed to introduce Glen Tickle. And he's like, fine. So this is exactly what he does. I'm supposed to introduce Glen Tickle. And yeah, they loved it too, you're right. In a decade of comedy, that still remains the best introduction I've ever gotten. Tristan, you did great before, but that's the one to beat. Here's the thing, I did that school a year later, and when I got there, they're like, is your brother here? I was like, no, I just brought my dumb friend Jason, I'm sorry. And they're like, no, we wish you brought your brother. They booked my brother to come back. They just didn't have his number, so they just booked me and they thought I'd bring him. At some point, the day my brother died, we had like a family meeting to talk about what Mark would have wanted and to be alive. But they meant like for a funeral. And right, we were raised Catholic, didn't really stick, so we didn't think like a mass would have been important to him. And what we decided to do was to just invite everybody over to my parents' house for a picnic and to have them play wiffle ball. Because my brother loved wiffle ball. He frequently turned my parents' backyard into what he affectionately referred to as Tickle Stadium. There was a scoreboard. And after he died, one of his friends painted a new one that said Mark Tickle Memorial Stadium, and they put it up. It's in my parents' backyard still. But we told everybody, we're like, you know, come to the house, dress nice, but also like flexible, because you're going to be on the field. And because my brother was 29 when he died, he wasn't like the kind of person who would have had a will at 29. So we're just kind of guessing. And I think we decided correctly. I think that's what he would have wanted. Everyone seemed to have a nice time. Because here's the thing. Funerals are fun. They're great, right? They're some of the best parties you've ever been to in your life. Like there's a sad bit up front, sure, but after a while, everyone just like goes to lunch and it's nice. Like you're surrounded by your family and friends and there's not like a shitty DJ blasting music. It's just like a nice time. Some of the best parties that I've ever been to were funerals, and some of the hardest times I've laughed were at funerals. When my maternal grandmother, when Grandma Gensheimer died, we were sitting in church, and my nephew was about 1 at the time, obsessed with Thomas the Tank. Loved everything they got going on the aisle, Sodor, he's on board for it. Knew all the names, whatever. So if you're not familiar with mass procedure, at some point the priest he does like a Cliff Notes version of the Last Supper. So he's holding up the bread and he's quoting Jesus, and the Lord said, and normally he goes, the Lord says, this is my body. And this particular day, the priest is standing there, he holds it up and he goes, and the Lord said, and my 1-year-old nephew goes, choo choo! And yeah, it's fun, right? So we all laugh. Because it's funny when little kids yell things. It's super funny when little kids quote Jesus as saying choo-choo centuries before trains were invented. So we all laugh about it. It's pretty funny. We all settle down, and then we look up, and the priest is still like this. He is bright red. He's trying so hard to keep it together. I can only imagine because he thinks if he laughs, he'll get hit by lightning. So we're all staring at him, and he's been like this for minutes, and like my arms are tired now. So he was doing it longer than me, and eventually he goes, "This is my body," and we all lose it again. And it's the closest anyone's ever been to be like, "Hey, you know what? Church timeout, guys. We need, I guess, recess. We'll come back. Everyone just go take a breath. Come back in 10. We'll start it from the bread bit again." But then when my other grandma died, when Grandma Tickle died, she died in Florida, wanted to be buried in New Jersey. So one of my cousins brought her body from Florida up to Jersey, and what I can only imagine is a Weekend at Bernie's situation, but she didn't want to talk about it. So somehow Grandma gets back to Jersey, and we're at the viewing, and it's a long, skinny room, and Grandma's at the back, and the door is in the other end. So at one point, I'm standing with my older brother up by the casket, and we're talking to everybody, being sad, and then what I can only describe as a coven of elderly Floridian women shuffle in from the back and approach my grandmother, encircle her. I still don't know why. And then their leader, I guess, speaks up and says, "Hello, we're Kay's Rosary group from Florida. We think Kay would have liked it if we could all say the Rosary together one last time." And my first thought was, yeah, I think you're right? Like I said, I was raised Catholic. Grandma Tickle was like capital I, capital C, Irish Catholic. Like she was in a Rosary group for fun. And if you're not familiar, so the Rosary, it's a string of beads. Each bead represents a prayer, and sometimes old women in Florida will go through and pray all of the beads at once for fun. And it takes about a week and a half, right? I went to Catholic school for 2 years, so my next thought was, well, I got to get out of this room, because then they said, just out of respect for Kay and for the prayers, we do ask that while we're doing it, nobody comes in or out of the room. I was like, all right, we got to go. So I grabbed my older brother. I was like, let's go. Come on. And he didn't go to Catholic school, so he didn't know what he was in for. I'm like, we got to get out of here. He's like, why? And so we're going, and people keep stopping us to be like, "Hey, sorry about your grandma." And my brother's like, "Oh, yeah, I know, me too. Let's talk about it." I'm like, "No, we don't have time." And I shoved him to the ground. I'm pulling Brian through the field of mourners, trying to get to the door, because they keep giving a countdown. They're like, "All right, we're going to get started in about 3 minutes. Remember, we're going to lock you all in here and say a lot of prayers." I was like, oh, God, I got to get to this door. Now, a lot of this show is me remembering things probably incorrectly. I did run a lot of this by people to see if I was right, and they flat out told me I wasn't on some of this stuff, but this is how I remember all of these events. And this one in particular, I tracked everyone down who I thought was in that room. Like, do you remember this next bit happening? And no one does, but it is one of the clearest memories I have of my younger brother, Mark. So right as the leader of the coven says, "All right, we're going to get started if somebody could close the door," my younger brother, Mark, is the last one out the door. Grabs the door, walks out of it backwards, making eye contact with me, closes it, and then like Indiana Jones reaching back for the hat, finger guns, and slams it shut. Because he went to Catholic school longer than me. He knew exactly what he was doing. So I am now trapped in a room with my dead grandmother and a circle of old Floridian women who are about to do a lot of praying. So I start laughing, because of course, that's hilarious. And my brother doesn't understand why I'm laughing, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And that's not helping my situation, right? Like, I'm laughing harder because of him. He eventually starts laughing because I look like such an idiot. And after a while, we're trying so hard to keep it together. They get 2 or 3 Our Fathers in, and eventually the leader just goes, "Hey, I know we said no one in or out, but you two can go." I was like, that's probably best for everyone. Yeah, you're right. And then we get out of there. And then a couple years later, my last grandfather died. Grandpa Tickle also died in Florida. Wanted to be buried in New Jersey next to his wife. And we had Grandpa's funeral on my 30th birthday, which I was kind of sore about, which I understand admitting doesn't paint me in the best light, but here's the thing. Grandpa died and was cremated weeks before the funeral. They could have done it any day. They could have done it on a Friday and given everyone a 3-day weekend. Instead, they're like, hey, what's going on April 27th? Nothing? All right, we're going to bury Grandpa. And it was my life is a dark reboot of 16 Candles, is what I'm telling you. They did it because they forgot, and it felt bad. And to top it off, they asked me to do the eulogy. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. Look, stage time is stage time. But they asked me to do the eulogy because I do this. And I was like, ooh, that's not a great reason. Like, I'll do it, but that's not good logic. Because normally as a comedian, what I do is like I travel around and I tell jokes to drunk strangers. And then I remembered, well, this is my family. So those two things are actually pretty similar. So I'll do it. And my dad wrote the eulogy, but he didn't feel comfortable delivering it. So he asked me to do it. And I read what he wrote, and there were jokes. Not great ones. So I was like, do you want me to take a pass at this? I can punch some of this up a little bit. He's like, will you please just read the thing I wrote about my dead father, you maniac? I was like, all right. Because he had jokes, I felt comfortable starting with one. He's like, you can explain that I wrote it and asked you to read it for me. I was like, okay. So I opened up with a joke. I was like, you know, I'm Glenn, I was Robert's grandson, Bill's son. He wrote this eulogy, asked me to deliver it, so just picture him 30 years ago, you get me. Look, it's not a great joke, but it was an easy room, right? It's sad relatives, it worked, don't judge me. But I thought of better jokes, right? I'm good at this. So I didn't do those ones because I wanted my family to still talk to me. So I'll do them now. And so I go up, and I wanted to open the eulogy by saying, some of you may not know this, like my parents. Today is my 30th birthday. So I'm not convinced this isn't all an elaborate surprise party and Grandpa's going to jump out from behind a pillar at any minute. He did not. Turns out, 100% dead Grandpa. And the other thing, like I said, my grandfather was cremated, and that was weird to me because he spent most of his life as a volunteer firefighter, actively trying to stop that from happening to himself and other people. But at some point, he met with a lawyer and took pen to paper to be like, that's how I want to go out. Live by the flame, die by the flame. That's a baller move, Grandpa. Right. Respect. So the night of my brother's viewing, we get to the funeral home, and they're showing us around, like, this is where all the sad people will come in. And there's the guest book. They can all write their names. And my sister-in-law looks at the guest book, and she picks up the pen, and she goes, we're going to need another pen. And the funeral director goes, is that one dried out? And she's like, no, it's for a collision repair place, and my brother died in a car accident. So, like, it's not that we didn't need the number of a good collision repair place. It's just like, that's a problem for later. And he's like, oh, God, I'm so sorry. And he went and just got, like, an unmarked Bic from his office. And he kept apologizing. We're like, we didn't think it was on purpose, right? Like, I'm sure just you have pens around from different things, and you grab one and you put it out next to the guest book. It's completely understandable. Or there is a very ambitious marketing director for that collision repair place who's like scouring newspapers to be like, guys, I have a great idea to drum up business. So it can't be that one, right? There's no way that makes sense. But during my brother's viewing, so we're all up by the casket, and people are coming through, and there's a long line out the door, and we're all standing there, and everyone's offering their condolences. But like, people would come up and they would like hug me for too long, right? Like, it became about them, and I was like, look, there's a long line. Like, I think Fight Club rules should apply to funeral hugs, right? If someone yells stop, goes limp, taps out, the hug is over, right? There's a lot of people, we need to keep the line moving. But it's an intense situation if you've ever been in it. And after a while, I was like, I need some air. So I looked, there are all these people, and I was just like, that's probably, all right, I'm going to take a break. And I go outside, and then I see that the line isn't just out the door. It is down the street. You couldn't see the end of it from the funeral home. I was like, you know what? I could use a walk. And I started walking down the block past this line. But when I was out there, I took a picture of the line, and that's not the end of it. It's just all I could fit. That's the funeral home all the way down there. They told us by the end of the night, over 1,000 people came out to say goodbye to my younger brother one last time. And right, because he was the cool one of the five of us, right? Like, it wasn't me. I know that, because you don't become a comedian because you were cool in high school. And I looked at that line and I just thought, if half these people buy my comedy album, I think it's really going to help me get over this terrible loss. And so remember before when I said that sometimes this material audiences would turn on me when I that one, that's the one. And because look, as I said, like I feel bad doing, when I talked to my therapist, I was like, I feel like me doing this is like turning a family tragedy, making it all about me, and I feel like I'm profiting off my brother's death. So what better way to do that than like a literal sales pitch in the middle of the show? Oh my God, it's on iTunes. I'm gonna leave you on this next part, but not for real. What's gonna happen is I'm gonna walk off stage as if I was done, but I'm not done. Because here's the thing, you guys have been very patient with this show and letting me do a bunch of sad boy comedy material, and for that I thank you. But the thing is, I've worked very hard on this show, and I want it to do well, and I want it to be successful, but what I don't want is for it to be the thing I am known for. I don't want to be the dead brother guy, right? Like, I got stopped once outside of a show by a very excited woman who goes, I know you. You that dad comic. I'll take that one, right? Like, so I'm going to do one more joke about my brother, and that's the end of the show. But I'm going to come back out and just do regular comedy again, because I've been working on this show for a long time. It's been taking up a lot of space in my brain, and I wanted to film it so that I don't ever have to do this again. And I just want to move on and just go back to doing regular comedy. So one more joke, and then happy jokes about children. Mine specifically, not just the thought. But the last time I saw my brother alive was at a comedy show. I texted him because I was doing a show in Edison, New Jersey, and I thought that's where he lived. It wasn't, because I'm not a good brother. But he came anyway, because he was a great one. And he's like, it's like an hour away, but sure. So he comes, and he brought his girlfriend, and they're sitting in the audience, and the other comics kept making fun of them, weirdly, for him being too handsome and for his girlfriend being out of his league. And I was like, you gotta pick one, right? You can't, these are conflicting ideas. They can't both be true. But after the show, I was hanging out with my brother, and the other comics come up, and they figure out that he's my brother. And they go, oh, are you funny too? And he goes, yeah, but I don't need to like parade it around. I do, desperately. I need this badly. Guys, thank you so much for letting me do my Sad Boy comedy show. I'm all done now, and we'll leave because the show is over, and I'm leaving for real. Goodbye. For me? That means so much because I know it came from the heart. I have 2 children now, which is the most children anyone's ever had before, and quite frankly, I'm a hero for doing it. And that polite chuckle is not what that joke deserves. I've done that joke a lot, and that's usually what it gets. You're not wrong. It's just, I think that joke doesn't work because you guys are worried about my kids. Is that what it is? You're like, 2's not that many. You should be able to handle 2, bud. I have 2. It's a lot, I think. Because the thing is, like, now they can team up on me, right? When I'm a great dad one-on-one, but when I'm outnumbered, I feel greatly overwhelmed. Because, like, they can coordinate their attacks, like the raptors in Jurassic Park. Like, when I see one of them, it's too late because the other one's running in from the side. My older daughter is 6. She can open doors now. Like the raptors in Jurassic Park. Caught my baby testing our fence for weaknesses. They're clever girls is what I'm saying. I'm one of 5 kids, and that's a lot, and my parents should probably be in jail. But we'd always ask them, like, Mom and Dad, who's your favorite? Who's the favorite kid? Who's your favorite? And they would never tell us, even though it's obviously me. And they're like, Glenn, when you're older and you have kids, you'll understand. You don't have favorites. You love all your kids the same. I have 2 kids now. Let's look at the lineup. I have 6-year-old Amelia, who sleeps through the night, can tell me what she needs with words I understand, and plays Mario Kart with me when I'm bored. And there's baby Olivia. She's 1. She's the sweetest little kid I've ever seen in the world, but she does still blow out a diaper every once in a while. So look, I love both my kids. There's a clear front runner. Joke's not mean if I don't tell you which one it is. It's the older one. It's clearly the older one. I've known her longer, I think, is what it is, right? Like, she's got 5 years on the other one. I can hang out with my 6-year-old, and she looks at me with all the love in the world. She's like, that's my daddy, I love him. And then I hold the baby, and she looks at me the same way, and it's like, I don't know, you like that baby? You seem fine, but like, let's give it some time. And I've been a dad for over 6 years, and I don't have any world's greatest dad stuff. Potentially for that last joke, but I feel weird asking for it. Like, I don't know if I have to earn it, or do I like fight my dad and take back all the stuff we gave him over the years? Is that the system? The beginning of June, like prime Father's Day shopping season, I was shopping with my older daughter at Target, and they had all the Father's Day stuff out, and we passed this big display, and I was like, oh, sweetie, look at all this reasonably priced merchandise, well within the budget of your allowance. And she had just gotten out of kindergarten, so she could read a little bit. So she's looking at these mugs that say, world's greatest dad. She's sounding it out in her head. She's looking over at me, looks back at the mugs. This little face is scrunched up so hard, she's trying to sound out, world's greatest dad. One last time, she looks back at me and just goes, world's a big place, Daddy. There's a lot of daddies in the world. Like, damn, you are ice cold, baby girl. So if you felt bad for the baby in that last joke, all she has to do is buy me a mug. She jumps to the top of the list. My love can be bought. I'm not proud of it. I travel a lot, and when I leave, I say goodbye to my kids. And I was on a trip recently, and I picked my 1-year-old daughter up, and I was like, Livy, Daddy's got to go, because I got to tell these people jokes. I got to give the jokes to the people. And my 1-year-old looks back at me and she says, Father, Papa, what are jokes? And I explained all of comedy to my 1-year-old daughter. And she looks back at me and she says, I understand, Father. Father, I understand the jokes. Father, I have written a joke. Father, will you tell my joke to the people? And I said, of course, baby girl. Would love to tell your joke to the people. This is the joke that she wrote. We all on board with the premise that a 1-year-old wrote the joke you're about to hear? Because otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? This is a joke my 1-year-old daughter wrote. I still remember my first doctor's appointment. It was terrible. I spent 9 months in the waiting room. Yeah. I'm raising a prodigy. Brooklyn, I gotta be honest with you guys. My 1-year-old baby didn't really write that joke. I know, I'm disappointed in me too. Actually, I wrote that joke with my friend Jason years ago about my older daughter. It was a collaborative effort, and the baby she doesn't even know I'm doing this. She's a baby. But she did really write a joke. My 1-year-old really wrote a joke, and I know you're not going to believe me because of that great waiting room joke about my wife's uterus that I just lied to you about. But this one's real. My baby really wrote this joke. She's 1. She's adorable. Sometimes when I'm feeding her, what she does is she takes her little sippy cup. She takes a big old drink of water and does this. And yeah, you're right. It is very funny. Now, I did that bit once, and the guy's like, hey, just because your kid did something funny once doesn't mean she wrote a joke. And I was like, yeah, but here's the thing. She didn't only do it one time. We all laughed when she did it, and she is my child. She's like, oh, I like that. So she does it a lot. Not every time, because my baby's not a hack, but she does it pretty frequently. All right, thank you guys so much for letting me do this. Thank you.